Welcome to the U of Digital Live podcast, where we break down major stories in marketing and advertising into easy to understand terms. We discuss interesting opinions, and we bring you, the audience, into the conversation. Enjoy. All right, welcome to another U of Digital Live episode. This is episode 2. I'm your host, Shiv. And we have our awesome co-host, Myles, here, and a bunch of great folks in the audience. And so we're excited today to talk to you about the latest news in marketing and advertising and ad tech and martech. We're going to do a little bit of a news roundup first, and then we'll get into kind of the top story of the week, and we'll have some discussion and some opinion about that, and then we'll hear from the audience and close things up. Just to kick off the news roundup, I wanted to talk first about upfronts. It's upfronts. This is the big one, right? It's the one that like legacy TV has always kind of operated around and secured money, from the buyers. So upfronts were this week. A lot of fun stuff going on in upfronts. Apparently, Lady Gaga did a whole set yesterday at the Google upfront, which was really fun. Apparently, even there was a standing ovation from the crowd, which is very interesting. Like, apparently advertising people don't get very excited about upfront stuff. They've seen it all, but Lady Gaga got people to do the standing O. So good job on you, Google, for bringing Lady Gaga in. But in terms of outside of the pomp and circumstance of the upfronts, what we've heard is upfronts are soft this year. Like, the commitments are softer than they have been in past years. And it is pretty much a direct result of the economic situation that we're currently in with tariffs and uncertainty. And so marketers are, fairly hesitant to commit big budgets up front. And so they want more flexibility in their buys. And, we're seeing that across the board. We're hearing that across the board. And I think it's interesting to just kind of think about that at a high level, because the downstream impact of that could be more dollars flowing into, I'd say like streaming, because streaming tends to be a more flexible buying environment than, let's say, traditional linear TV. So that's interesting, I think, for a lot of the digital players and the streaming players in the space. And we'll see what that means in terms of like transaction types and deal types, but like open market versus PG versus PMP, like maybe there's a little bit more of a push towards open market this year with CTV buying because of that. Also, we've heard, over the last year or two, there's more supply than ever in streaming, partly because Amazon opened up the floodgates with Amazon Prime Video last year. And so we've heard that the kind of supply demand curve has shifted in streaming, where it's not just like very limited supply and tons of demand, but now there is maybe more supply out there and actually less demand. And so it's just going to be interesting to see how that plays out the rest of this year. The next thing I wanted to talk about, and Myles, I'm going to definitely want your take on this one, is Q1 earnings, right? So we've been covering this in our newsletter. Q1 earnings have been very positive, which is exciting, and kind of surprising. I think people, especially after some of the misses in Q4, people, I think, were expecting Q1 to be like, kind of hot and cold. And Q1's been pretty solid. I think the growth numbers have been stronger than expected across the board from a lot of the tech companies and the media companies. I think the guidance is where there's trepidation, right? For the rest of the year, guidance has been pulled back from a bunch of companies because, again, tariffs, uncertainty, etc. But in general, Q1 was stronger than expected. And then also we're seeing that in the bull market, right? The last couple of weeks, the market's been going up. Obviously, there have been some pullbacks from the administration on tariffs, which I think is helping the markets. And so maybe things are stabilizing a little bit. I do personally suspect that when we talk about Q2 earnings, it's not going to look as good. Like, some birdies around the industry have told me that their Q2s are not very good right now. They're pretty soft. And so Q1 positive, headed in the right direction, maybe Q2 soft, but overall trajectory, we may be headed in a positive direction. Myles, I'd love to hear your perspective, especially like from the marketer side of things. What are you hearing?
So a couple things. One, yeah, I mean, the market seemed to have made up like some of the ground that they started losing a few months ago when all this tariff stuff started getting announced. Like, That's my highly scientific analysis of that. I checked my like retirement account balance today. And I'm like, oh, it's down, but it's not down as bad as it was. So yeah, this is good news. And so like clearly, whatever the arsonist has started to put out the fire, and like the markets are recovering a little bit. Good news, better than a raging fire. Um, yeah, the other thing is, outside of the, like, advertising and media space, there are, like, been, alarm bells for weeks and months now just in the, broader whatever economy of publicly traded companies, many of whom are the world's largest advertisers. I think the number one thing, to look at is just the sheer number of companies, and very large prominent companies at that, who are suspending guidance, either for the rest of the year or through the first half of the year. I did a little bit of research in advance of this. I'm going to rattle off some names just so we understand, kind of what's at stake here. In automotive, GM, Ford, Stellantis, that's who makes Jeep, Dodge, Chrysler, Mercedes, UPS, Procter and Gamble, PepsiCo, United Airlines, and a bunch of other airlines that I won't bother naming. Snap pulled guidance, and it could like crush their stock by like 19% the next day or something. I have no idea. Maybe it's recovered since then. Mattel, Diageo, Walgreens, Boots Alliance. So, like, if we're thinking about the ad market, Shiv, and you're talking about Q2 and beyond, these are the companies that pay for the ad market. You know, the Trade Desk doesn't pay for the ad market. Meta doesn't pay for that. They are recipients of ad dollars. These companies, the ones that are suspending guidance, are the ones that actually fund money into the ecosystem, and they are by and large, pretty worried about the situation. And so I actually also wanted to tie back to, your comments on the upfronts, where all of this uncertainty ties directly back into these companies' buying strategies of like they are going to be less willing to commit budgets up front to things, and they are going to be, more attracted to, methods, tactics, channels, buying methods that let them keep their options open. The last thing I was going to say is, we could be looking at, you kind of, if you take the story arc of marketers growing increasingly accustomed to being able to adjust budgets quickly, where, 10, 20, 30 years ago, budgets could not be adjusted on a dime. Marketers are growing more and more accustomed to being able to do that. COVID and the supply chain shutdown that happened there was kind of the first, say, test of that in the modern age, of how quickly could you realign budgets based on some big external thing. And I think we may be seeing kind of like the second round of that test, of the industry being tested. And we could do many episodes on what that might look like. But yeah, there's definitely like a lot going on in the earnings reporting, publicly traded company, large advertiser space.
Yeah, and my big question is like, is this temporary because the administration has been operating in kind of like a very short term with a short term mentality, or is there some permanent kind of damage or long term damage or impact, and that's going to suss itself out probably throughout the course of this year, right? So, okay, let's shift gears. Um, a couple of final quick things I want to shout out before we move to our top story. So, first of all, AppLovin, which is one of the largest ad companies in the world now, bigger than the Trade Desk by a mile, um, has agreed to sell its gaming business to a company called Triple Dot for $800 million, which I find to be fascinating. We'll see how that kind of impacts the mobile market. Um, uh, ChatGPT is now doing product recommendations that are just like native to the LLM itself, I believe. And that is so interesting, right? There's no clear kind of like ad product there yet. But, I don't know if you saw this, Myles, I think Chat OpenAI hired the head of Instacart's business recently.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And that is a clear like Instacart went from being a retailer or whatever you want to call Instacart's business to being an ad company. They're an ad company for all intents and purposes. That's how they make, I think, like 30, 40 plus percent of their revenue and growing. So she turned that business into an ad business, and they hired her to run, part of their business. And so that just signals to the market like where ChatGPT and frankly other LLMs will probably move towards. And I think, Myles, you might have tweeted this or said this. that's probably the next big kind of battleground is like affiliate marketing in OpenAI in LLMs, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think they want to insert themselves into shopping the same way Google inserted itself into shopping with AdWords. It's like we have the demand, we have the interest, we're going to have some model by which we're going to sit in the middle and monetize access to whatever it is you're selling.
Yep. Um, Next story, just a couple things. Google, a few weeks ago, there was the remedies that were proposed from both sides in the antitrust case for Google. So the DOJ made their proposal, Google made their proposal. We're not going to know anything about this case, materially, probably till September. I believe that's the hearing for the remedies. So just want to make sure everyone kind of knows that like that's the next big milestone. It's September, unless it changes before then. And then the last fun thing before we get to our big story is Google changed its logo. Did you see that, Myles? Did you salute?
I literally thought it was a joke. And that's not a commentary on the logo. It was the way somebody had tweeted it. Ad Tech God tweeted something that was characterized it. I was like, oh, whatever. This is somebody's joke. And then I actually Googled again to prep for this podcast because I saw it in your notes. I'm like, oh, wait, they actually are not changing the logo.
Aris from the audience just said there's orange in the logo now, which is a new color in the palette in the Google palette. It's amazing. Well, Aris, technically there are a bazillion more colors in it now because it's gradients, right? Oh, it's all just a gradient, just the whole spectrum of colors. Let's get to our big story of the week. So yesterday, Microsoft put up a blog post saying a lot of things, right? Just like all the blog posts from the companies when they go out, there's a lot of words. But the key kind of words that they said were and I'm gonna actually just pull this up and I'm gonna read it verbatim to everybody because I always think that is valuable. So 1 second. Okay, so what they said was let's see, where do we want to start? Our commitment to a more private and personalized advertising experience for a more agentic and conversational world is not achievable with the industry's current DSP model, which therefore no longer aligns with our investment in this future. As a result, we will no longer support media buying through our DSP Microsoft Invest starting on February 28th, 2026. We are committed to supporting our clients during the transition, ensuring they have the guidance that they need to minimize disruption, blah, 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 blah. Additionally, we will continue to support access to Microsoft and partner inventory through third-party DSPs who share our focus on privacy, quality, and transparency. The other kind of important things in this blog post that they said was they will continue to support buyers through the Microsoft advertising platform, which is, as far as I know, like a little bit more of like the Google Ads version of Microsoft's tech stack. So it's more of like the walk-up self-service ad platform as opposed to an enterprise DSP. And then they will continue to support publisher-facing tools like Curate and Monetize, which are publisher-facing tools within the Microsoft stack. And the gist of this blog post, it's all about agentic AI, right? So they're talking mainly about how they believe the future of advertising is around agentic AI, and they don't believe the DSP model will support that, or at least the DSP that they have will support that. They also talk a lot about things like privacy, personalization, and use those, intermittently throughout to explain why they're doing this. So, at a high level, what's happening is Microsoft is sunsetting the DSP, which, just so everybody knows, the history behind that DSP is pretty significant. It used to be AppNexus, which was one of the original kind of ad tech companies in the space. Originally, I think that was more of an ad exchange, but they pivoted into being more of a DSP over time. They sold that business to AT&T, which then became Xandr. And then Microsoft acquired that whole stack, and now they're shutting down the DSP aspect of the stack. So that is what's happening. Also, quick part of the story, which is very important and impactful. Microsoft 2 days ago laid off 6,000 people. And a lot of, not the majority, or I don't know the exact numbers, but a good number of this DSP team were part of those layoffs, and they were impacted, which is really unfortunate. And if anybody can do anything to help those folks find new roles in the industry, please do that. So now let's get into the opinions and the kind of so what for all of this. I have heard and I have seen a lot of interesting kind of takes on social media since this blog post went up yesterday about why this may be happening. I've heard the takes that Microsoft doesn't care about this kind of thing. Ad tech's just an annoying thing. They care about cloud and they care about AI. And I think there is weight to that argument. Like, and even Google is kind of going through this right now of like, is it worth it to try to monetize the open web with these really low margin DSP products? Maybe not. Right. And so I think that has some weight to it. Somebody said that it's all about privacy. I am not buying that at all. I do not think it is a privacy thing at all, even though they say the word privacy many times. I said this on the last podcast. I think we are backtracking from privacy as an industry. Amazon and Google monetize their data all day long on third-party inventory using their tech stack. Why would Microsoft all of a sudden say like we won't do that? Not buying it. Not buying that it's about privacy. Um, I think there's something to be said about there's more value on the pub side of the ecosystem, which is why maybe they're doubling down on monetize and curate. Through this kind of big trend right now going on with curation. Maybe there's more margin to be had there, more value to be created there. And so that's an argument. I heard another argument that it has to do with antitrust, that Microsoft's looking at how Google is having to deal with all this antitrust stuff, how they're playing both sides of the market, and Microsoft doesn't want to mess with that. I do not buy that at all. Why would Microsoft be like scared of Google's antitrust issues? That would be a good problem for Microsoft to have if they grew a massive media business and dominated so much that they had to be in court. Not buying that one at all. And then the last one, and honestly, this to me is like the most obvious and clear explanation. The DSP business is really hard. There's consolidation happening in the space. There's 3 or 4 winners right now. Even some of the winners feel a lot of pressure on this business and don't love this business, like the Googles of the world and maybe the other top players. And I don't think they want to be in this business. It's a hard business. It's super competitive. Also, since they bought it from Xander or they bought it from AT&T, I think they've just been struggling to execute and integrate. Their market share has been going down. So they're just like, we just don't want to be in this business. It's not a good business to be in. And I think just the most obvious answer is probably the most accurate answer. And so let me pause for a second. Myles, I'd love to hear your quick thoughts if you have any.
Does anybody know Shiv, Eras? Has anybody heard? Are they completely sunsetting the technology or are they divesting it? Is someone going to buy it?
I don't know. The blog post doesn't tell us. I read the whole blog post. I read the articles about the blog post. It is unclear. It sounds like it is a sunset. Uh, I am always confused. Yeah, Aries came up mute.
It would be really interesting if they tried to sell it when they're basically like, we think the DSP like business is done for. Like, oh, do you want to be paying?
Totally fair point. Totally fair point. Because yeah, I mean, that by itself is just kind of telling that it's the story arc of AppNexus has been like just epic in the industry, and then it's meeting this kind of ignominious end of just like we're shutting it down. This business isn't worth being in. The technology's not worth running or keeping. All these things. So to have been like a fly on the wall at Microsoft, over the course of this decision-making process, I think would have been really interesting and revealing. And I don't maybe some journalist said maybe you'll get some, anonymous tips or something to help explain like what the internal conversation was. Like, was it that super sort of business like cynical conversation of just like we're just looking at this from a dollars and cents perspective and it doesn't make sense, or is it more kind of taking Microsoft at its word in that blog post of where they're talking about the future of advertising and media, that the future of it has changed over the last couple of years. Like the future of advertising and media today doesn't look like it did 3 or 4 years ago. It's completely changed course. We don't know where it's headed, but we know it's headed in a very different direction than it was. And then secondly, just the future of software. So any DSP is kind of now having to make up ground that they were not natively built for an AI era. They're just full of deterministic rules. It was state of the art 4 or 5 years ago. is no longer state of the art. And so, yeah, it would just be really, really fascinating to have a legitimate understanding of how they reached that decision. Because I think, like you said, Shiv, it can be explained in multiple different ways, many of which are frankly fascinating to think about. And so, yeah, it's big news for sure.
Yeah, and I think the fact that they cite agentic AI as the future and then they are shutting down their DSP, I find that really interesting. Like, I agree. That is the future. And we're not going to have these clunky UIs where you set up campaigns and like, do bid factors and all the things that we do in DSPs. Today. Like that won't exist in the future. But like it is also fascinating to me that one of the companies that is leading the charge, one of the biggest tech companies in the world leading the charge on AI, right? They're the biggest investor in Anthropic. They have one of the most, foremost technologies in AI called Copilot. Instead of saying, hey, we're integrating that into this product and we're revamping our product, they're like, no, we're out of this business model, right? I find that to be fascinating. It's very telling to me, right?
Yeah. Well, if any company on earth would kind of have a pretty good rationale for does it make sense to retrofit this pre-AI technology with AI, yes or no, it would be Microsoft. And Microsoft clearly has decided, no, it is not worth retro. The future is what it is. Eris, you came off mute, man. What do you have to say?
So I am not willing to sort of declare the death of the DSP quite yet. I do think that there is still value in having the UI, like how it's all built, right? There's a lot of people. It's not one person that's managing this account. There's so many people that are going in. So yes, you're going to add agentic AI and layers and be able to talk to it, but still somebody wants to go in and just see a report without having to tell it, hey, pull up the report X, Y, and Z, click some buttons, see a thing. And so I think there's a hybrid of sorts that's going to come. With that said, I think this made a lot of sense for Microsoft that had another play. They could deprecate the DSP. They still have all of this inventory. They just have to create a lightweight UI. And so for them, it makes like perfect sense. But I think other DSPs that don't have that play, first of all, aren't going to do it. But I do think there is still some value. So they're going all in, whereas I think there might be others that are sort of going to do this hybrid approach.
Yeah, sometimes you don't want the chat. I'm grown. I think we're all getting a little bit exhausted from the chats of the LLMs. So just give me what I want.
I think the idea of like the LLMs is so interesting to me because I think people sometimes assume that if you have a thing that knows all the things in the world in the back end, that's all you need, right? You go there and you start talking to it and it'll give you everything you need and you want. But I think people forget that a lot of times people don't know what they want, right? People need things pushed to them about what they should need to know about X, Y, and Z, right? And so the curation aspect of these tools is critical. And an LLM, just a dialogue box that you can go start typing into, doesn't solve that problem, right? And so, anyways, we're going on a tangent now. Any other soapbox material from the audience on this Microsoft Xander Invest, whatever we want to call it, news?
David, you're personal friends with Bill Gates, right? What did he tell you?
Yeah, when Bill called me to discuss this was the thing that I was thinking about was Shiv. I think one of the first things you said as far as the reason, and it maybe it is a sign on things that it for any part of a business where this is the maybe the 48th biggest priority, maybe the 73rd. Microsoft's got to have a list that goes like that. And by the way, this gets to the divestiture question too. But a long, long list. And, the DSP from Xander was probably pretty far down that list in terms of priorities. And anything that distracts from the big ones, it's hard to say that that's worth the investment of a DSP. But back on the divestiture question, it probably feeds into that too. I mean, I don't know what the max value Microsoft could collect from it is, and there would probably be some willing buyers out there, but any number that it would be below the status of a rounding error on a Microsoft balance sheet or anything else. So it's probably not
David,
corp dev.
are you telling us that ad tech is not the center of the universe?
That's the other saying, man. Last comment on this, and then I'll shut up. Is that the idea of ad tech or a DSP as part of a large enterprise, I mean, I think you'd have to argue this comes under fire on something like this. But, a lot of smaller or somewhat larger independent DSPs and others are still seeing, and those even within Amazon, seeing good growth. So I don't know. I think it has something to do with where is that threshold where it's worth it.
I'm just going to add to that, David, is you just made kind of an interesting point in favor of the strength of independent ad tech, where when you try to fold it into larger corporations, sometimes it just doesn't work. It's hard.
Another point, listen, Amazon is not going to cut its DSP. It's going up and to the right. I don't think Xander was doing that. So speeding, probably a reason why.
Don't you think like a company like Walmart or Netflix, like if I'm an executive at one of those companies and I'm looking at this, I'm making some calls and asking for like, hey, can I get the bargain bin price on this or something? But it's interesting, yeah, like, it's interesting that, like, they clearly don't have an intention to divest or at least maximize any kind of outcome from divestiture if their blog post is like, "This technology is going extinct very soon," right? Okay, so let's get to the last section here, which is, like, the so what of this news. I think we're continuing to see consolidation in traditional, let's say, ad tech. We've seen this with a lot of supply side tech kind of being folded into bigger things over the last year, or going bankrupt or getting picked off for pennies on the dollar. We're seeing this now in the DSP market as well. And so I think this is just going to kind of continue. I think legacy traditional ad tech, people don't have an appetite anymore to have to pick from, 20, 30 different players. They want simplicity. They want ease of use. They want scale. And they want it in one place, right? And so, even if a company like Microsoft can't make it work, you can imagine what that means for the entire segment. On the flip side of that, I think this is definitely a tailwind for a bunch of the other demand side tech that's out there that still wants to kind of stay the course. And as you mentioned, Amazon, their DSP is like everything right now, right? That's up and to the right. They're putting a lot of effort and energy and resources behind that right now. And this is very exciting news for Amazon, for Yahoo, for the Trade Desk, right? Trade Desk is obviously this is their entire business. And so those guys are pumped. I've seen some social posts from other DSPs, Viant, StackAdapt, etc., saying similar things. Hey, we're here to help. And so I think this is a tailwind for a lot of that like independent ad tech DSP sector. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out throughout this year and into next year. I think the date that Microsoft said the sunset is happening is February 2026. So there is some time, but I would imagine clients are already looking about reallocation of budgets. I also think the other big so what, especially because this is all couched in the explosion of agentic AI. And we know that tools like PMax and Advantage Plus and Plus Advantage Plus Plus and Advantage Performance Plus Minus and all of those tools are taking off, right? We know that. And so, Microsoft's basically, I mean, in my opinion, Microsoft's telling us that in the next couple of years, or maybe sooner than that, they're going to have Microsoft plus plus plus. And we'll see what that looks like. But I think more of the world is moving towards that model of, hey, give me your budgets. I mean, Zuckerberg said it a few weeks ago, like the future is you give me a budget and an outcome, and then I go drive it, or the AI goes and delivers it for you. And so I think we're moving towards that world. I mean, the other thing I would say about that is that world is a little tricky. And this happened early days with ad tech when we had ad networks. Ad networks were kind of a similar value prop, right? Give me your money. It's a black box, but I'll drive you, conversions or CPA or whatever you want. That's kind of what's happening right now with these AI tools. So I think, we're going to go through this phase where, oh my God, this is awesome, say all the marketers. And then all of a sudden people start like gaining the system a little bit. These tools, come under scrutiny because they're doing funny stuff in the background. The attribution's broken. The brand safety is questionable. And then all of a sudden they have to open up the black box a little bit more and more and more. And, it's a cycle. It's always a cycle in our space. And so those are some of the so what's, I think, to look out for. Eras, you had something to add there?
Yeah, I'm curious because you said these AI black boxes are taking off, and I haven't seen much evidence to show that they're taking off. There's a lot of buzz, a lot of hype. Those platforms are talking about them, releasing signals, that there's new updates and things like that. And the industry is certainly talking about them a lot, but I don't see marketers necessarily talking, hyping them up, or necessarily signs that, especially on the enterprise side, but even in general, there's a lot more revenue necessarily going through them.
Yeah, I mean that's a fair point. I think maybe what I've heard is more directional and anecdotal, and so maybe there's some kind of like scrutiny to be applied there. But what I have heard is like PMAX is growing like gangbusters, and to your point, it might not be coming from the enterprise; it might be coming from mid market, right? So it might not be like net new or incremental growth. It might be kind of migration of dollars from, let's say, a Google Ads over to a PMAX. So that's an interesting thing to look into. I've heard Advantage Plus, the Meta product, has just absolutely crushed for Meta. But again, I don't know the specific financials behind that. And I also wonder like what segment are they kind of seeing the wins? Is it mid market? Is it enterprise? I'd imagine more mid market. I know the other companies are copycatting, right? So again, like I made the joke, but literally every walled garden has some kind of version of this now. Pinterest announced a thing. I think Snap announced a thing. Amazon has their thing. And so I would imagine like it's a copycat industry, and people are only really doing copycat stuff when they see it's already successful in somewhere else. So I would imagine there's win in the sales of these products, but Ares, it's a fair point. I haven't scrutinized it.
I'm going to throw in one more kind of so what thing there from the perspective of the buy side is so Microsoft, if we're reading the tea leaves of that blog post, one of the things you can interpret from it is Microsoft saying, we are not going to simultaneously support a DSP interface for buying media alongside a more whatever agentic model, whatever that looks like, alongside a more AI, LLM driven or LLM centric model. We are not going to simultaneously do both of those. We are deprecating the old thing. And it you never know, a couple of quarters or even years from now, this may have proven to be a canary in a coal mine. And zooming out, you can look at Google, you can look at Meta, you can even potentially look at Amazon and ask yourself, how much longer are these companies going to simultaneously support essentially two completely different media buying paradigms? One self-directed and deterministic and rules-based and very kind of input driven from like a trader or whoever, and the other one is just completely built around AI. So that's the other so what if you're thinking about your tech stack strategy for the coming years is how long are these companies going to give you two ways to buy, and how soon do those collapse back down to one?
I would clarify one with full transparency and control and one with much less.
Oh, there are differences between the methods. I'm saying, if you're the CEO or CFO of a company, you're like, wait, why do we have two software teams building parallel buying products? Why are we doing this? Why not take these people and move them over and make this one twice as good and deprecate the first one, and everybody be happier?
You can look at Google that had DB360 and Google Ads forever. Why did they support two buying doors? And one was for enterprise and one was for smaller buyers. And I think it's kind of going to be the same here, at least for the companies that can sort of support both.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, Microsoft's kind of a little funny too when it comes to digital advertising. Like so many fits and starts and acquisitions and sunsets over the years. They bought a Quantive back in the day, which is like a huge investment. They're like, we're in ad tech, and then that didn't work out so good. I think they bought Atlas at some point, and they're like, yeah, ad serving, and we're gonna sell this to Facebook. That didn't work out so good. I forget there were some other big ad tech acquisitions along the way that I'm forgetting. But this is, the next one, right? Xander and Xander, we don't know, right? So what's the next, in 2 years, they're probably buying the next big agentic DSP, and they'll be back. So and with that, thank you guys. Thanks to the audience. Thank you, Myles. Thanks to everybody listening at home. This was episode 2 of You of Digital Live. We're going to be doing these every Thursday moving forward. So if you want to join us, just register. We'll circulate the link. We'll have it in the show notes. And you can just put it on your calendar and join us and have a conversation about what's happening in marketing and advertising. Thanks, everyone.